I never thought tonight would be anything special. It had started like any other night, me, Emily, a tired single mom, trying to get through the day without losing my mind, and Sophie, my little 3-year-old, who somehow carried endless energy even after a long day. We had just finished a late grocery run. The car filled with the faint smell of bread and milk, the dark streets glowing under the streetlights like tiny islands in a sea of black. Sophie was asleep in her car seat, her little blanket pulled up to her chin, and I glanced at her quietly, my chest tightening with a mixture of exhaustion and love. How could someone so small make you feel so responsible, so worried, and so completely in love at the same time? The night was unusually quiet. I noticed it as soon as I turned onto the narrow road that led home. There were no distant sirens, no barking dogs, not even the usual hum of traffic. Just the low, constant whine of the car and Sophie's soft breaths. I should have felt relief, but instead something in me tensed. There was a stillness that felt wrong, like the world had paused for something I couldn't see yet. As I drove past a cluster of trees lining the side of the road, I saw it, a faint glow flickering behind the thick branches. At first I thought it might be a small fire someone had lit, maybe a campfire or a bonfire. But it moved subtly, almost like someone was waving a light. My heart skipped. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to just keep driving and pretend I hadn't seen anything. After all, I had Sophie with me. Why risk anything? But something deeper, something stubborn inside me made me stop. I couldn't just drive by. I couldn't. I parked the car a little ways down, keeping Sophie safely strapped in, and stepped out. The cold night air bit at my cheeks, sharp and sudden. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint smell of wet soil and something I couldn't place. My heart pounded in my chest as I walked closer, each step careful, quiet, almost hesitant. And then I heard it, a weak, muffled cry coming from the darkness. My stomach turned over. That wasn't a bird. That wasn't an animal. That was a person. I froze. "Hello." I called softly, my voice trembling slightly. Sophie stirred in the car seat behind me, but thankfully didn't wake. "Is someone there?" The cry stopped for a moment, then returned, even weaker, like a whisper of sound. My instinct screamed at me to run, to lock the car and drive home as fast as possible, but another part of me, the part that had spent sleepless nights worrying over Sophie and the world, made me move closer. Someone needed help. Someone was in trouble. I pushed through the undergrowth, branches scratching at my arms and legs. The glow I had seen before now flickered again, this time closer. And then I saw him. Or rather, part of him. A man trapped in a hole in the ground, only his face visible, streaked with dirt and sweat. His eyes were wide, full of fear and something else, relief maybe when he saw me. His mouth opened, but only a weak rasp came out. I realized immediately he couldn't get out on his own. He was stuck. He looked terrified. I swallowed hard, fear mixing with adrenaline. "It's okay. I'm here. I'm going to help you," I shouted, hoping he could hear me clearly. My heart hammered so loud I thought he would hear it over his own panic. I glanced back at the car, Sophie's little silhouette barely visible through the windshield, and forced myself to focus. I could do this. I had to. There was no choice. My courage felt like it had to be bigger than my fear, because the alternative, doing nothing, was impossible to live with. The man's eyes widened even more. He tried to move, to reach for me, but the dirt and rocks pressed against his legs like a trap. I looked around, searching for something, anything I could use. Branches, a fallen log, my mind raced. I grabbed the longest branch I could find, then hesitated. Was it strong enough? Could I actually pull him out with it? My heart screamed that I had to try. I stepped closer, hands shaking, and hooked the branch under his arm. "Hold on," I shouted. "I've got you." I tugged with everything I had, straining until my muscles burned, until my feet slipped in the mud, but still he didn't budge. The earth held him tight. Tears stung my eyes. I cursed under my breath. Come on, you can do this," I whispered, not just to him but to myself. I remembered Sophie, alone in the car, and it made the fear sharper, more urgent. If I failed here, if I couldn't get him out, it would haunt me forever. I clenched my teeth, digging my heels into the soft earth, and pulled with all the strength I had left. Finally, a small shift. He groaned, a sound of both pain and relief. He wasn't free, but he was closer. I grabbed another branch, then another, using them like levers, pressing every ounce of energy into pulling him out. And then suddenly he was half out, his chest and head above the ground. He gasped, coughing, spluttering. Mud streaked across his face, but his eyes were fixed on me. Thank you, he whispered, his voice hoarse and trembling. I don't know how much longer. His words broke off into a gag. And I realized he was too weak to speak more. I knelt beside him, grabbing his shoulders. It's okay. You're safe now. Just hold on. My hands shook as I brushed dirt from his face. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled under him. I realized he wouldn't be able to walk. My mind raced. How could I carry him? I didn't even know who he was, and I had no help. All I had was myself and Sophie waiting in the car. But I couldn't leave him here. Not after everything. Not when I had a choice. Emily, he whispered suddenly, almost a rasp. You have to get me out of here. Please. Please. His voice was urgent, laced with fear, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach twist. He wasn't just trapped. He was in danger. Real danger. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to focus. Okay, I said, more to calm myself than him. We'll figure this out. I looked around again. The forest was silent, the shadows thick and heavy. Every sound seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the distant howl of an animal. My heart beat faster. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I had no choice. I had to try. I grabbed him under the arms and with a heave lifted as much as I could. His body was heavier than I expected, but I wouldn't give up. Step by step I managed to get him out, his legs dragging through the mud, until finally he collapsed onto the soft ground. I knelt beside him, breathing hard, mud covering my clothes, my arms aching, my hair sticking to my forehead. But he was alive. I had done it. Somehow I had done it. He turned his head toward me, eyes wide and trembling. Emily, he said again, his voice barely audible. Then he whispered something that made me freeze. Something I couldn't understand at first, but it felt like a warning, like the kind of secret that could change everything. They're coming for me. You shouldn't have helped me. My chest tightened. Who were they? Why was he trapped? What had I just gotten myself into? I looked down at him, mud streaked across his face, his clothes torn, his eyes pleading. And somewhere, deep inside, I felt the same resolve I felt every time Sophie needed me. No matter the danger, no matter the fear, I couldn't leave him. I couldn't run. I had to help him. Somehow. I heard a faint rustle behind me, a sound that made the hair on my arms stand on end. The forest seemed darker all of a sudden, like the shadows had deepened, closing in around us. I glanced back at the car, Sophie still asleep, and my heart ached with worry. I couldn't let anything happen to her. Not now. Not ever. But I also couldn't leave him here. And as I looked into his eyes, seeing the fear, the desperation, and the faint glimmer of hope, I realized that tonight, nothing would ever be the same. Whatever danger waited for us, whatever secrets he carried, I was part of it now. And I had to face it, for him, for Sophie, and for the promise I had always made to protect those I loved no matter what. I took a deep breath, wiping my hands on my jeans, and whispered, more to myself than to him. Okay, let's get you out of here. Whatever it takes. I helped Ethan to his feet, his arms barely able to hold himself up. The forest around us felt impossibly dark, the trees looming like silent witnesses to whatever had happened here. I glanced toward the car. Sophie was still asleep, but my stomach twisted with worry. Every step I took away from her made my heart pound. She was my world, my reason for everything, and yet here I was leaving her for a few minutes to try to save this stranger. But he couldn't stay here. Not like this. Can you walk? I asked him, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands shook. He nodded, though barely. His legs trembled as if every muscle in them had forgotten how to work. I grabbed his arm, steadying him as we moved slowly through the forest. The mud clung to my shoes, sucking at every step, and the branches scratched at my arms, pulling at my jacket. I hated every second of it, hated that I was so exposed, hated that I didn't know who, or what might be out here with us. Ethan's voice was soft, almost a whisper. They won't stop. You don't understand. I wanted to ask who they were, why they were after him, but there was no time. The rustle of leaves behind us made my heart leap, and I pulled him down behind a thick tree. Stay quiet, I whispered, holding my breath. The wind whistled through the branches, carrying an eerie sound that made me shiver. "Emily, my name is Ethan," he said finally, his voice low and hoarse. "I thank you for helping me. But you don't know what you're in." I swallowed hard, gripping his arm tighter. "I don't care. You were trapped. I couldn't leave you there. Just tell me how to get you somewhere safe." My voice trembled, but I tried to sound firm. I couldn't let fear take over. Not now, not when Sophie depended on me to be brave. Ethan's eyes darted to the shadows around us. "It's not just the forest. They're organized. They know I'm alive. If they catch me, it's not just me, it could be anyone who helps me. Including you." A chill ran down my spine. I had known helping someone in trouble could be dangerous, but this felt different. Serious. Real. I glanced back at the car again, imagining Sophie alone, and my stomach twisted. I couldn't imagine leaving her, not even for a moment, and yet I had to get Ethan somewhere safe. I had to balance protecting my daughter and helping this man. "Where do we go?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My mind raced through every possibility. My small apartment was too exposed, too easy to find. There had to be somewhere he could hide, at least until I figured out what was going on. Ethan hesitated, his eyes dark with worry. "There's an old cabin a few miles from here. It's abandoned, but it's secure enough for now. I don't have much time." He coughed, his body shivering with cold. They'll come looking tonight." I nodded, trying to memorize the path he described. My feet hurt, my arms ached from supporting him, but I kept moving. Every snap of a twig underfoot made my heart jump. Every shadow seemed to hide someone waiting to strike. My protective instincts for Sophie collided with my responsibility for Ethan, and I felt pulled in 1,000 directions at once. The forest seemed endless. Trees and darkness surrounded us, and I could feel the fear creeping in, trying to take hold. But every time I thought about Sophie, her little face trusting me completely, I forced myself to keep going. I couldn't give up. Not now. Not when someone's life depended on me. Finally, the cabin appeared in the distance, a silhouette against the faint glow of the moon. It looked old, abandoned, maybe even unsafe, but it would have to do. I guided Ethan inside, helping him collapse onto a dusty cot that was surprisingly sturdy. He breathed hard, his chest rising and falling in ragged gasps, and I knelt beside him. "You need rest," I said, brushing mud from his jacket. "I can get some supplies, maybe blankets, food. You can't keep moving like this." Ethan shook his head weakly. "No time, they'll find me if I stay too long. Emily, you don't know what's at stake." "I don't care about that right now," I said firmly. "You're hurt. You're exhausted. And you're not leaving this cabin without my help." My voice softened as I looked at him. "You're alive because of me. You're going to stay alive with me, too." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine, like he wanted to understand how a single mom with a small child could somehow have so much determination. Then he sighed, a sound of relief and exhaustion mixed together. "I don't know how to thank you. Nobody has ever done this for me." I smiled faintly, brushing some dirt from his face. "Don't thank me yet. You're not safe. Not fully. And neither am I, if they find us." Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. "They won't stop. Emily, I need to tell you something important. Something you might not want to hear, but you have to know." I frowned, my stomach twisting with dread. "What is it?" He swallowed hard, his eyes darkening. "I'm not just someone who got trapped in the woods. I have enemies. Powerful enemies. People who won't care who gets hurt as long as they reach me. And now you're involved." I froze, my mind racing. I wanted to deny it, to tell him that I couldn't handle this, that Sophie deserved a normal, safe life, that this wasn't my problem. But looking at him, vulnerable, frightened, trusting me, I realized there was no turning back. I had stepped into this, and there was no way out that didn't involve danger. "I don't care about enemies," I said finally, my voice firm. "I care about protecting people who can't protect themselves. You're here. You need help. And I'm not walking away." Ethan's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of admiration or disbelief passing through them. You're not like anyone I've ever met. Most people, they would have run. They would have left me." I shook my head, the resolve in me solidifying. "I have a daughter. Someone small who depends on me completely. I've learned one thing: if you leave someone to suffer, if you walk away when you can help, you live with it forever. I can't do that to anyone. Not you. Not anyone. The room was silent, save for the soft creak of the old cabin settling and Ethan's ragged breaths. The night outside pressed against the thin walls like a living thing, and I knew this was only the beginning. Whoever or whatever was after him wasn't going to stop. And now they knew someone else was helping him. Me. I glanced at Ethan again, his face pale and drawn, yet alive because I had refused to walk away. I realized then that fear could only control me if I let it. Courage, determination, the willingness to act when no one else would. That's what mattered now. I had to protect him. I had to survive. And somehow I had to keep Sophie safe too. He coughed again weakly, then whispered, "Emily, there's more. If they catch me, if they get to me, there's no telling what will happen. I can't explain everything now. But you have to trust me. You have to be ready." I nodded, though my stomach churned with worry. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "No," he said softly. "Not really. You've already chosen by saving me. Now, it's just about surviving." I looked around the cabin, the shadows deep and threatening, and realized that I had stepped into a world I didn't understand. But one thing was clear. I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when someone's life and my own depended on it. I sat beside him, brushing the dirt from his hair, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on me like a heavy coat. I whispered softly, mostly to calm myself, "We're going to make it. Somehow. Me will get through this." And in that moment I knew the night was far from over.
Danger waited.
Enemies lurked. But I had faced fear before, in sleepless nights with Sophie, in moments when survival seemed impossible. And I would face it again. Whatever it took. Because I had already chosen to be brave. And bravery didn't end just because the first challenge was over. The first light of dawn barely touched the trees outside the cabin, but I had already been awake for hours. Sophie was still asleep in the car seat I had dragged inside, her small chest rising and falling with the soft rhythm of sleep. I watched her for a moment, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach, the knot that reminded me how fragile life could be, how quickly it could be stolen, and how much responsibility rested on my shoulders. I glanced at Ethan, who was resting on the cot. He had slept a little, but the tension in his face hadn't eased. His eyes were shadowed, his body still trembling from the night's ordeal. I felt a pang of sympathy mixed with fear. Whoever was after him wasn't going to stop easily, and somehow I was now involved in a world I didn't understand. "We need a plan," I said softly, even though I wasn't sure if he could hear me. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to find us." He turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting mine, dark and haunted. "I know. But it's not that simple. If they find me, it's not just me. They'll come for anyone close to me. You, Sophie, you're already in danger by being here." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I had expected danger, but not this level of threat. It was one thing to rescue someone trapped in the forest, another entirely to be hunted because of it. "Then we protect ourselves," I said, forcing conviction into my voice. "We can't hide forever, but we can be smart. We can stay ahead of them." Ethan looked at me, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief in his eyes. You're not just brave, Emily. You're insane." I gave a faint smile, brushing a strand of mud-caked hair from his face. "Maybe. Or maybe I just don't have the luxury of fear. Sophie depends on me. You depend on me right now. That's all the reason I need." We spent the next hour quietly preparing. I found some old blankets in the cabin, and we wrapped Ethan tightly to keep him warm. I checked the small stash of supplies I had in my bag, water, a few granola bars and a flashlight, and realized how unprepared I was for this kind of danger. But I had to make do. We had to move soon. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "Emily, if we're going to survive, there's something you need to know. About why I'm being hunted. About what I really do." I froze, gripping my flashlight tighter. "I've already made my choice. I don't care what it is. But I need the truth if we're going to plan anything." He hesitated, swallowing hard, then whispered, "I work in investments, very high stakes. I've crossed people who don't forgive mistakes. They think I've hidden something valuable. And now they'll do anything to get it back." My mind reeled. I had expected danger, maybe someone desperate, maybe even someone angry. But this was bigger than I had imagined. Real dangerous people. Powerful. Ruthless. I had stepped into a world I barely understood. And suddenly the stakes weren't just about survival in the forest, they were about life and death. I shook my head slightly, trying to focus. Then we need to think like they would. We need to be unpredictable. We need to stay off the radar. And we need a place to hide, somewhere they won't find us. Ethan nodded, his hands trembling slightly. There's an old safe house. Abandoned for years. Security's still intact though. Cameras, alarms, everything. It's risky to get there. But it might be our best shot. I swallowed. Risky sounded like an understatement. How far? I asked. About 5 miles. Through the woods, over a small stream, past the highway. It's not easy, and if they're already tracking me, we might have to move faster than planned. I glanced at Sophie, still asleep, and my chest tightened. Moving her through the forest with a man who was a stranger just yesterday. Carrying supplies we barely had, this was insane. But I didn't have a choice. Then we leave at first light. Quietly. Carefully. And we keep moving until we're safe. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. I've never had someone care this much for me. Not like this. Not in my life. I shook my head again. Then don't think about me. Think about surviving. About living. About not letting them win. The hours passed slowly. The tension in the cabin suffocating. Every sound outside, the wind through the trees, the distant cry of a bird, the snap of a twig made me jump. I kept checking Sophie, making sure she was still asleep, still safe. My maternal instincts were sharper than ever. The part of me that refused to allow anything to harm her. Finally, the light shifted, soft and pale, the first rays of morning cutting through the trees. We had to move. Ethan groaned as he stood, his legs stiff, but he didn't complain. I strapped Sophie into the baby carrier, her small hands clutching at my jacket as if she knew we were about to face something unknown. Step by step, we moved through the forest. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my heart jump. Ethan led the way, but I kept glancing around, flashlight in one hand. Sophie pressed against my chest, trying to keep her calm while keeping myself ready for anything. The first obstacle was the stream. The water was cold, rushing over rocks and logs, and I could feel Sophie shiver against me. I hesitated. Then Ethan extended a hand. I've done this before. Trust me. I nodded, gripping his hand and slowly stepping into the icy water. Sophie whimpered and I whispered softly to her. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. We'll be okay. Step by step we made it across, Ethan supporting me when I slipped, keeping me steady when the rocks shifted beneath us. Once we reached the other side, I let out a small sigh of relief. Almost there, I whispered. Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the forest around us. Almost. But we have to be faster. They could be close. We continued, moving through the trees with as much stealth as we could manage. My muscles ached, my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. Sophie stirred but didn't wake, her trust in me unshakable even in this chaos. And that trust, that tiny faith, gave me strength I didn't know I had. Finally, in the distance, the outline of the safe house appeared. It was old, gray, and foreboding, but it represented safety. A place where, at least for a little while, we could breathe. We approached cautiously, every step measured, every shadow observed. Ethan's hand gripped mine. Inside we can rest. We can think. We can plan our next move. I nodded, swallowing hard. Then let's get inside. Quietly. Carefully. And pray they haven't found us yet. The door creaked as we pushed it open, dust falling from the hinges. Inside, the safe house was dark, musty, but intact. Old furniture, a few empty shelves, and the faint smell of wood and thyme. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was safe. For now. Sophie stirred in the carrier, rubbing her eyes. I whispered softly, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's got you." She settled back against me, and for the first time in hours, I allowed myself a small sigh. Ethan slumped against the wall, exhaustion written across his face. You saved me," he said quietly. "And now you've brought her through this too. I don't know how to repay you." I shook my head, brushing mud from my own jacket. "No one repays me. We survive. That's all that matters. That's the only way forward." And in that dim, dusty safe house, with Sophie finally calm against my chest and Ethan recovering slowly, I realized something important. Fear would always be there. Danger would always be close. But courage came from doing what had to be done, from protecting the ones you loved, from refusing to let the darkness win. We were far from safe, far from free. But we had made it this far. And somehow that felt like the first victory. The safe house was quiet, almost eerily so. But it felt like a small fortress compared to the forest. I carefully set Sophie down on one of the old, tattered couches, wrapping her in a blanket I had found. She yawned, rubbing her eyes, and I couldn't help but smile. Even in the middle of chaos, she still found small moments of peace. Ethan slumped in a chair across the room, running a hand through his messy hair. "I haven't felt this alive in a while," he muttered, though it came out more as a whisper. "But at the same time, every sound outside makes me think they're coming." I nodded, pacing slowly. "They might be. That's why we need to make a plan. Hiding isn't enough. We need to know what we're protecting, what they want, and how far they're willing to go to get it." Ethan hesitated, glancing around the room as if the walls might have ears. "It's hard to explain. What they're after, it's not just money. It's information. Something that could ruin people. People with power, people with influence. If they get it, no one is safe." My stomach twisted. I had expected danger, yes, but this was bigger than I imagined. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. "Then we protect it. No matter what. And we protect Sophie. That's the only way we survive." He gave me a small, grateful smile. "You're stronger than anyone I know. I don't know how you do it. Alone and with her." His voice trailed off, but the weight of his words hung in the air. I shook my head, feeling the familiar rush of responsibility. We can't waste time feeling sorry for ourselves. We need to move to make sure we stay ahead. Can you tell me exactly what we're dealing with? Names, places, anything." Ethan's eyes darkened. "I can, but it's dangerous. They'll come after anyone who knows. That's why I didn't tell anyone before. But now you've already saved me. You've already put yourself in danger. You deserve to know." I nodded, bracing myself. He began to explain, slowly, carefully, the network of people he had crossed, the deals that had gone wrong, and the secrets he had unearthed in his line of work. Every word made my chest tighten. The world Ethan lived in was one I could barely comprehend. A world of power, betrayal, and danger that reached far beyond the forest or the city. When he finished, silence fell between us. I looked at him, then at Sophie, and realized the gravity of what we had stepped into. But fear wasn't an option. Panic wouldn't save us. Only action, only careful strategy could keep us alive. "We need to be smart," I said finally. "We move during the day when they least expect it. We change locations often. We keep our trail covered. And most importantly, we trust each other." Ethan nodded, looking weary but resolute. "I trust you. I don't have much choice, do I?" I gave a small laugh, more from relief than humor. "You do have a choice. But right now, survival comes first." We spent the next few hours preparing. I gathered what supplies we could find: water, food, blankets, anything that could help us survive the journey ahead. Ethan checked the small security system in the safe house, making sure doors were locked, windows secured, and any cameras functional. Every noise outside made me tense, my hand instinctively resting on Sophie's shoulder. As the afternoon stretched on, I couldn't shake the thought that we weren't alone. The forest around the safe house was thick, but I had learned from the night before that danger could be anywhere. I moved silently from room to room, listening, checking, making sure we weren't walking into another trap. Finally, evening came, and Sophie dozed against me again, exhausted from the day's events. I sat quietly, feeling her small body warm against mine. Ethan remained across the room, staring at the wall, lost in thought. "Emily," he said suddenly, his voice low, "I know this is a lot to ask, but after all this, will you stay with me? Not just here, not just surviving, but when it's safe." I froze, my mind racing. I had never thought about anything beyond survival, beyond keeping Sophie safe. But the way he looked at me, tired, vulnerable, yet hopeful, something inside me shifted. "I will see," I whispered. "Right now we survive. Later, maybe." He nodded, understanding the weight of my words. Survival first. Trust second. Everything else would come later if we were lucky. The night settled in, dark and quiet outside the safe house. I watched Sophie sleep, her small chest rising and falling, and I felt the familiar surge of determination. Danger was still out there waiting, but I was ready. I wasn't just Emily, the single mother. I was Emily, protector, fighter, and strategist. And I would do whatever it took to keep Sophie and Ethan safe. As the first stars appeared in the sky, I made a silent promise. No matter what happened next, we wouldn't just survive. We would fight. We would move. And we would never let fear win. Because tonight was just the beginning. And tomorrow we would take the next step. Morning light crept through the thin curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Sophie stirred in her blanket, yawning and rubbing her eyes. I held her close, feeling the warmth of her little body, and for a moment I let myself breathe. But I knew it was only a moment. Danger didn't rest, and neither could we. Ethan was already awake, checking the small map of our route across the city. "We need to move now," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off the map. "They might have realized I'm gone. The longer we stay, the higher the chance someone finds us." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility press down on me. Sophie, still half asleep, clung to my arm, trusting me completely. And I wouldn't let her down, not now, not ever. We packed what little supplies we had. A few bottles of water, some snacks, extra blankets, and Ethan's emergency bag with documents and a small amount of cash. Every movement was deliberate, careful, like we were rehearsing a silent dance we had never learned but had no choice but to master. Before leaving, I looked around the safe house, my heart heavy. It had been a temporary refuge, a place where we could catch our breath. But it was time to leave. There was no turning back. The streets outside were quiet, almost unnaturally so. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind rustled the trees. Every sound made me tense, my eyes scanning for movement, for shadows that didn't belong. "Stay close," I whispered to Sophie, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. Ethan walked beside us, keeping his eyes on the surroundings, alert for any sign of danger. We moved quickly, slipping through alleyways and side streets, avoiding main roads as much as possible. My heart raced, every instinct screaming that someone could be watching. I thought about the night Ethan had been trapped underground, about how helpless he had felt, and I realized I understood that feeling now in a different way. We were exposed, vulnerable, yet determined to survive. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the end of an alley. My breath caught, and I instinctively pulled Sophie closer. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't an enemy. It was a delivery man with a package, nothing more. Still, the moment reminded me that fear could strike even when no one was there. Ethan guided us toward a small, abandoned parking garage, a shortcut he had memorized from one of his previous routes. "This will take us closer to the safe house I know," he explained. "It's not perfect, but it's our best shot." The garage was dark and smelled of damp concrete and rust. My footsteps echoed as we moved silently, every creak of the floor sending a jolt of anxiety through me. Sophie whimpered softly, sensing the tension, and I hugged her tighter. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "We're okay. Mommy's right here." We paused near the exit. Ethan crouched beside me, eyes scanning the street outside. "We go fast. No stopping. Eyes open. Keep Sophie close," he said. I nodded, feeling the adrenaline spike in my veins. The moment we stepped into the sunlight, everything seemed to slow. Shadows danced across the pavement, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. My grip on Sophie tightened, my heart hammering in my chest. Suddenly, a black car slowly rolled past, windows tinted. Ethan froze. "Don't move," he whispered. The car lingered for a moment, then turned a corner. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm the panic that had seized me. We kept moving, heartbeats synchronized with every careful step. The city stretched ahead, full of possibilities and dangers we couldn't yet see. But for now we had each other, and that was enough. Hours passed, each one stretching into an eternity. We avoided busy streets, hid in shadows, and took routes that seemed safer but added time. My mind raced constantly, thinking about what could happen if we were caught. If Sophie cried too loudly, if Ethan's pursuers were closer than we thought. Finally, as night began to fall again, we arrived at a small, discreet building. Ethan opened the door, revealing a modest community center. Quiet, welcoming, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Relief washed over me, but I didn't let my guard down. Inside, volunteers greeted us with smiles, offering food, blankets, and a safe place to rest. Sophie's eyes lit up, and she immediately ran toward a small play area. For the first time in hours, I felt my shoulders relax, my breathing ease. Ethan looked at me, exhaustion and gratitude mixed in his gaze. "We made it," he said softly. I nodded, holding Sophie close. "For now," I replied. "But we can't let our guard down. Not yet. We still have a long road ahead." We settled in for the night, the hum of the community center providing a strange sense of normalcy. Sophie slept in a small cot beside me, and I watched over her, my mind already planning our next steps. Outside, the city continued, unaware of the small family who had fought through fear and danger to find safety. Inside, for the first time in a long time, we could breathe. For tonight, at least, we were alive and together. But tomorrow, the real challenge would begin. The morning sun streamed through the small windows of the community center, casting warm light across the room. Sophie stirred, blinking sleepily, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time in days, I didn't feel the constant weight of fear pressing down. But I knew better than to let my guard down completely. Danger was still out there, and our journey wasn't over. Ethan was already awake, speaking quietly with one of the volunteers. He glanced at me and gave a small nod. "They're helping us get some supplies," he said. "Food, blankets, a safe place for Sophie while we figure out our next steps." I held Sophie close, watching her little hands explore the folds of the blanket. She smiled at me, unaware of the fear we had faced just hours before. My heart ached with love and relief. I promised myself I would never let anything happen to her again, not if I could help it. Suddenly, the door opened and a man stepped inside. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes that made me tense. Ethan went to meet him, whispering quickly. I stayed where I was, holding Sophie, listening. After a moment, Ethan returned. "They're offering a longer-term solution," he said. "A program for people like us. It's not perfect, but it's safe. We can stay here as long as we need while we rebuild." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. Safety was comforting, but I knew we couldn't hide forever. We had to face the world step by step and reclaim our lives. The day passed slowly. Volunteers helped us organize our few belongings, showed us where to find food, and introduced us to other single parents who had been through struggles similar to ours. Their stories were different, but their courage mirrored our own. Each small conversation reminded me that we weren't alone. Late in the afternoon, Ethan pulled me aside. "I have something to show you," he said, leading me to a small room in the back. On a table lay a folder with documents, photographs, and notes. "This is information I've kept," he explained. "If you follow this plan carefully, it could give us a chance to stay safe and start fresh." I took a deep breath, examining the documents. They included safe routes, contacts, and strategies for avoiding danger in the city. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope, not just survival but control over our future. Sophie tugged at my sleeve and I knelt to hug her. "It's going to be okay, baby," I whispered. She smiled and I felt a warmth spread through me. We had been through so much, yet here we were together, stronger than ever. As evening approached, we gathered with the other parents and children for a small meal. Laughter filled the room, soft and genuine, and I realized that life could still hold joy even after fear. Sophie played beside me, giggling, her tiny hands clapping as another child made a funny face. I caught Ethan's eye across the room. He gave me a small smile and I nodded in thanks. He hadn't just saved his own life or even just mine. He had helped us find a chance at living fully again. That night, as I tucked Sophie into the cot, I whispered softly, "We made it through, baby girl. We're safe now. And we're going to be okay." Her small hand wrapped around mine, and I felt the bond between us strengthen, unbreakable. I stayed awake a little longer, thinking about everything that had happened. The fear, the desperation, the courage, and the kindness of strangers. It had all brought us to this moment. And I realized something powerful. Even in the darkest nights, hope could find a way in. Outside, the city lights twinkled, indifferent yet beautiful. Inside, I felt a warmth that no fear could touch. We had survived. We had fought. And most importantly, we had each other. As I finally closed my eyes, I promised myself that no matter what came next, I would protect Sophie, guide her, and show her that even when life seemed impossible, courage, love, and hope could light the way. And somewhere in the quiet, I knew that Ethan's kindness would always be a reminder. Sometimes a single act of help can change the course of a life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, and new decisions. But tonight we had one. Tonight we had hope. And that was enough.